Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Um, the original plan for this session was to go through some information and then kind of do a group activity. But unfortunately, we don't really have enough people for the activity. So I'm going to go through a few things really quick. And unless more people show up, this will be like a really quick session and we'll let you go. See, okay, so we wanted to go over really quickly what food justice is. And I'm personally a big fan of this definition, so I wanted to read it to you guys. But the food justice movement envisions a food system that is inclusive, community-led, and participatory without the exploitation of people, land, or the environment. It identifies and acts to remove the significant structural inequities that exist within our food and economic systems. Food justice activists seek to establish healthy, resilient communities with equitable access to nourishing and culturally appropriate food. And I really like this definition because not only does it bring in like aspects of the environment, but also aspects of people and creating those kind of self-resilient food systems necessary to really bring about food justice. And then I wanted to go over just like a few other significant terms whenever you're kind of in the space of talking about food justice. And the first one is food sovereignty. And this is really a strategy for reaching food justice, essentially. So I have another definition to read to you. And that's food sovereignty is the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods and their right to define their own food and agriculture systems. It puts the aspirations and needs of those who produce, distribute, and consume food at the heart of food systems and policies rather than the demands of markets and corporations. And this is so important because, again, for us to create resilient, equitable food systems, we need to make sure that the people in need of them and utilizing them are the ones coming up with the solutions. That way the food systems are going to work for everyone and not just these large corporate identities. And then the next definition I want to go over is food apartheid. And this is kind of a relatively new term when talking about food justice, and a lot of organizations and activists support using this term over the term food desert, which you may be more familiar with. And that's because when you hear the word food desert, you kind of think of an area as being desolate and without potential. And food deserts historically used to describe an area where there's no good access to healthy food for individuals. So no grocery stores, and just like an area where people are facing challenges in acquiring healthy, consistent access to food. But food apartheid kind of like changes the frame away from like, oh, this is a desolate area that needs kind of outside help to it's food apartheid is a systemic destruction of Black self-determination to control one's food, hyper-saturation of destructive food and predatory marketing and blatantly discriminatory corporate-controlled food systems that result in communities of color suffering from some of the highest rates of heart disease and diabetes of all time. So again, instead of framing it as a community that is desolate and that needs outside help, it's framing it as a community that has been subject to systemic inequality and mistreatment from larger corporations. And then similarly, food insecurity, and this definition is from Feeding America, which is actually the larger organization in the United States that kind of oversees the operations of all of the food banks and pantries across the US. And they define food insecurity as a lack of consistent access to enough food for every person in a household to live an active, healthy life. And this can be a temporary situation or it can last a long time. And that's a really pivotal part of the definition because many families that face food insecurity, it'll only be during specific periods of hardship. COVID-19 is a great example. You see some of the people that are most subjected to food insecurity really being impacted by it most during this challenging time, both economically and with food distribution system problems. So since we have a few more people that joined on the call, we're going to do the activity. We're just going to kind of revise it a little bit. So I'm not going to put you guys into breakout rooms, which was the original plan, but if y'all are willing, I would love to hear who you are, why you're interested in food justice, and then I'll kind of give you guys like 15 minutes to find a particular food justice issue or organization or article that you find relevant and interesting, and then you can just give us a short description of what you learned. And we can all kind of learn from each other about different food justice issues in the country and in the world. And I'll hand it off to Gracie for her to introduce herself.
Yeah, so my name is Gracie and I'm a sophomore studying paper science and chemical engineering right now. And I am also a sustainability steward working with Haley and LP to plan this event. And so I have actually been really excited about it because I do not know much about food insecurity and food justice. And so I'm very excited to learn more this week and have this opportunity.
Hi, I'll introduce myself too. Sorry, couldn't find the unmute button. I'm Haley Hall. I am a program specialist in the sustainability office and an alumni of the Stewards program. I've been a part of planning the Environmental Justice Symposium for 3 years, but this is by far the best one so far. I'm really excited for all we have this week. I hope you guys are able to join us some more. And as far as food justice goes, I think it's a topic area I've been interested in, but I definitely do not know the breadth of what we're covering this week. So I'm really excited.
I can introduce myself now. Can you hear me? My name is Jenny. I'm also a steward. I'm part of the waste reduction group, and I'm a senior right now. And food justice is definitely something I don't know as much about as I would like to. So I just wanted to join this call to learn more. Unfortunately, I'm making dinner right now, so I may be in and out, but I will definitely look for a source for a particular topic that I'm interested in.
All right, I guess it's my turn. So my name is Mawed Belmosri. I actually am an alumni. I just graduated in December with the degree in sustainable materials and technology. And I'm interested in many type of sustainability things, but I would say like everyone else, I am probably lacking knowledge mostly on like food insecurity. I've heard about it in like guest lecturers and stuff like that talking about it, but I don't know enough about it. So I'm excited. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. I guess I'll introduce myself because I never actually did that. But hi everyone, I'm LP. I'm currently a sophomore and have been working on planning the symposium. Food justice has become kind of a recent passion for me. I've gotten involved through Interfaith Food Shuttle Farm, building gardens and volunteering at the farm, and just discovered that I'm really passionate about this work, which led me towards helping to plan the symposium. But you know, I still am learning every day, so I'm by no means an expert on this subject. So I'm excited to see what sort of new information we can share. So I'm gonna turn my mic and camera off, and I will be back in 15 minutes at 4:30 with a new article piece of information to share. And I would love it if you all did the same, but if you're cooking dinner or whatever else, no worries. You can just feel free to listen as well. All right, everyone. Would anyone like to share what they found first?
I can share first. So one thing I've been particularly interested in recently, because I hadn't really heard a lot about it, was veganism and how it relates to food justice, because we actually just got done with like Meatless March, and we were kind of focusing on, oh, it would be great if everybody in the world went vegan, basically, and how good would that be for the environment, and everything would just kind of get all better. And I guess like it is true that veganism is super like sustainable in certain environments, but then a friend of mine, I was talking with them about Meatless March, and they said, yeah, but veganism is a form of modern day imperialism. And I was like, what does that mean? I had never like thought about that before. And so during these past 15 minutes, I was like, this is the perfect time for me to research this. And I found a lot of really interesting articles. I can put them in the chat. But it was basically saying how like modern day veganism is basically like imperialism, because it completely ignores people from like outside either the United States or like Eurocentric spheres, and how their land would be more suited for animal products. But it also just completely excludes like indigenous people from the conversation, and how basically because veganism is becoming so popular in like Eurocentric spheres, it's leading to a lot of like depletion of resources in like the global south, and like just which is not sustainable in and of itself. And it's just, I found it really interesting. I can go ahead and put the links in the chat. But I'd love to learn more about this topic, because I completely like never thought about it. I never really knew anything about it until now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing, Jenny. I know I have a lot of like die-hard vegan friends, so I like kind of had this like rose-colored lens towards veganism, and then when I kind of got into my studies as a wildlife major, it kind of changed my perspective a little bit, because we talk a lot about like wild game and animal products. Anyway.
I actually, just to like tack on to the conversation, I was able to attend the plant-powered women panel, which I really appreciated as a part of the Meatless March, programming. And one of the points that I brought up as a question was, how do we include like farmers in this generation? Because I was like, not everyone's going to be vegan tomorrow. So like, how do we create a system that's like a sustainable transition that includes like small scale farmers and, dairy farmers, local farmers? Like how are they a part of this conversation? And unfortunately, most of them were like, they shouldn't be. they shouldn't, like, not like that bluntly, but one woman was like, oh, I think that, they just need to get with the program to like move over. And I was like, interesting. But I think that it's really important that like, I don't think that in itself makes it as accessible, and I consider myself a flexitarian. And I find that that's a lot more successful, not to like say, like put veganism down, but I find it's a lot more successful in starting conversations on how people could eat less meat, is because it's like, hey, you don't have to be perfect to just eat less meat. And yeah, something else you could keep in mind, I guess.
I'm gonna start using that, flexitarian. That's totally what I am. I'm pescatarian unless it's Thanksgiving or there's like freshly hunted game around, that I'm full on carnivore.
I can just like talk about what my topic was. I definitely want to like look more into it. But on the panel earlier, that we had earlier in the day with Jenna Wadsworth, she mentioned like COVID-19 specifically, and what food insecurity was like, how it had gotten worse because of COVID-19. And so I just like very briefly started like looking up numbers and stuff. And the ones that I specifically found, the first article that I managed to look at was like Feeding America, but they were saying that like before COVID-19, it was at an all-time low. Most like places were saying that food insecurity was at an all-time low, with like 1 in 9 individuals experiencing food insecurity, and that meaning 1 in 7 children. But then after COVID hit in 2020, it went to 1 in 5 experiencing, 1 in 5 for children and 1 in 7 for adults. And so just how much like worse it got. And then they did a projection for 2021, and so far they think that that it'll get slightly better, with it being 1 in 8 individuals and 1 in 6 children. And so just like, but this article that I found had just like crazy numbers, and then the big thing that it also talked about was like the racial and ethnic disparities. Like 1 in 12 white and non-Hispanic individuals, so that's like 8.1%. But then you go like Latino individuals is 15%. Black individuals is 20%, and Native Americans are the worst at 23.5% of their population experiences it. And that's like a lot of factors leading to that, just such as like the structural racism and discrimination that we face in every day, and just talking about poverty rates and stuff. And so it's kind of like a spiraling thing where like everything that you find has another reason that it's like that, and you've got to, and it all goes back to just, you know, that we have a lot of like inherent racism that we have to work on, and there's like a lot of legislation and stuff like impacting that. But it'll be interesting. I'd like to do more research to see what kind of stuff is being done because of COVID-19 now, because Jenna Wadsworth talked about a bill that she wanted to get passed to help with COVID-19, but it did not get passed. So I'd be interested to like looking to see what other things have been passed or could be passed, stuff like that. But.
I'll add on to comment on yours. I'm a talker, y'all, so just tell me to be quiet if I'm doing too much. But a really great book, not specifically to food justice, but as far as like understanding the complexities of how these systemic issues overlap one another, is this book called Clean and White. It's a history of environmental racism in America as a whole, and it traces it all the way back to like the very steps of colonialism. And it's really, really thorough. I think it's awesome. And it talks about the overlays of how racism kind of can drive non-sustainable practices in and of itself, and just their correlating relationship. I really appreciated it. Side note, I was having a conversation with one of my friends the other day, and he was like, well, you know, to put it in perspective, like food insecurity has dropped significantly over the past 20 years. He was like, it's only exponentially getting better, and it will from here. And I was like, okay, that's great. There's 11 million tons of food waste a year. I was like, we have the capacity to do it now. It's just about setting the priorities. So yeah, absolutely. And I think that the numbers that you talked about, Gracie, show that.
Yeah, like they had one thing that was highlighted that said like, yeah, these numbers might seem small, but that's still 35 million people and 11 million people. And so if you look at stuff just as a percentage, then like, yeah, percentage, it's, you know, the percentage, the all-time low was 10.9, but that's still 35 million people that aren't eating like the rest, you know, like everybody should be. So yeah.
I can go next. So I've always been, since my major really focused on climate change, I kind of looked at climate change and how it affects food insecurity, of course, because climate change is affecting food security through like the increasing temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, and greater frequency of like extreme weather events. And like studies have shown that essentially like lower latitude regions are more negatively affected, and higher latitude regions are like positively affected, which I guess makes sense because the like lower regions are closer to the equator. So mostly food insecurity affecting in like dry lands, particularly those in Africa, and it says high range mountain regions of Asia and South America. This was from the IPCC. It's a report. So it was really long. I didn't like read all of it. I kind of skimmed through it. What was the, yeah, they were saying that food and vegetable production being the most vulnerable to climate change, which of course are very important to our diet. And it also talked a little bit about the consumption of healthy and sustainable diets, which I guess kind of relates to a little bit of the veganism, but if we can kind of like shift our diets to be more healthy and sustainable, that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions overall. And just, you know, switching to coarse grains, it says pulses, fruits and vegetables, and nuts and seeds. And it does say like low and energy intensive animal sourced like foods. And then the last thing is, and like we just talked about, the food waste. So reducing food waste would also lower the emissions and improve food security. I read here, it says combined food loss and waste amount to 25 to 30% of food produced. So essentially all the food, 25 to 30% of the food that we produce, we waste, which is an insane amount. And like I said, it's a super long report. I can actually put it in the chat if anyone wants to look at it. I thought I like this is probably the most interesting stuff to me in terms of how climate change affects our lives in many ways. And since it does affect food security, I would say it's a good topic. Oh, and the other day, like 2 days ago, I watched a documentary, and I'll also link that, called Just Eat It, if anyone's interested in it. It was a really good documentary also about food waste, if anyone has the time to watch it. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. I very much appreciate your willingness to tackle a whole IPCC article. I can tell you're definitely got that science drive. So thank you.
It's the STEM in me. I have to read like high level reports to feel like I'm actually doing the research. But yeah.
Talking about documentaries, I just want to like plug that through our website, for the whole week, you can also watch Kiss the Ground, which is, as far as I still have to watch it before, but as far as I'm concerned, like pretty, like also about climate change and how that's affecting like soil and food insecurity. And so that might be something that's like extremely up your alley as the climate change aspect of it. And you can like watch it through our website for free. So
what was it called?
Kiss the Ground.
Can you link it through the website?
Yes, I can.
I think you would really appreciate that. I just wanted to add my fun facts I know about how climate change is going to affect our food production. A couple of quick things that I've heard is that it's really going to affect our coffee production and our chocolate production, because those are the countries that are like right close to the equator. That area that you were talking about will be affected. I think even sea levels rising might end up like affecting crop productivity. But the article I read about the chocolate was really, really, I guess not a great outlook. They were like, you may not be eating real chocolate by like 2050. It may just be impossible to grow because that's the area, you know, where it could be mass cultivated. People should be more concerned. Do we want to lose chocolate?
Coffee and chocolate, ooh, that'd do it to me. Also, saltwater intrusion is going to be a big agricultural problem, especially in the Southeast. It already is, but moving forward. And, you know, not to mention natural disasters, hurricanes, and
I can go ahead and do my article, I guess. Let's see. Go pull it up. Mine was from the Union of Concerned Scientists, and it actually touches back on what I was talking about before of the history of environmental racism, but more as it pertains to food justice. So the long history of food justice could also be traced all the way back to colonialism. As, you know, Europeans moved over to the New World, they displaced a lot of indigenous communities, as we all know, that had sustainable small-scale farming practices that really took care of the soil and was very, I guess, respectful to all of the surrounding ecology, animals and plants alike. And immediately started to do things at a way that they could minimize profit and maximize scale, which is how you get the portion of the international slave trade and how they first started using things like that. And then upon the Industrial Revolution, post sharecropping, which was also another strategy apparently, you needed less and less farm workers as technology improved. And then the government started releasing apparently legislation that only helps large farms get larger. Like the idea of consolidating all of our food production to a couple of companies became marketable and what was favored by our federal government. And on top of all that, it also mentions how that was, of course, I guess, nuanced with racism too. So they didn't want female large farms like taking off, or people of color, Black large farms taking off. So they really shown preference to the white male landowners that have kind of, as it's always been, which is really interesting to think about how things really haven't changed much at all. Despite all these years, like the principles are kind of still the same.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that a little bit, and it's kind of a little bit off topic, but I think it is at this point a fight against our government and our system, because even last night I was watching Mission Blue, which is more focused about the ocean, but she was talking about, I don't know if anyone knows Sylvia, I can't remember her last name. She's apparently a big environmental activist and a diver who cares a lot about like marine life, but she was talking about how, yeah, she worked for NOAA for a while, and she started noticing that she was being silenced for what she's trying to do and trying to change things. And that's when she resigned, because yeah, it really is a structural issue that we're having to fight against, because a lot of people do care and are trying to change things, but when someone tells you, no, you can't do that, or this is, these are lines set in place, we can't do that, that's where the struggle is.
I love that documentary that you're talking about. I'm trying to find her name right now, but I have her, I know what she looks like.
Yeah, I had never heard of her until yesterday, and I was like, this woman is now my role model. So it's great.
I haven't seen that one. I'll have to watch it. I'm a huge fan of documentaries, so. Okay, I can talk about my article. I found a news piece about several different federal bills regarding farm workers, specifically paths to citizenship for migrant farm workers. And there's kind of 3 proposed bills right now floating around, and the 2 more positive ones, unfortunately, just do not have the bipartisan support that they need to be passed. So I'm going to focus on the one that's like most likely to actually get passed. And that is the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. And there actually is some bipartisan support for the bill, but it's also, there's a huge debate around it, because while it does lay out a clear path to citizenship for migrant farm workers, there's also a lot of inherent problems with it. Because first off, to attain a permanent legal residency, a farm worker would have to provide evidence of their employment, which is often difficult because they're often like paid cash under the table, especially if they're illegal immigrants, and they have to stay in the agricultural industry for 8 years, which is insane considering the history of low wages, mistreatment, and probability of having severe health issues from like such laborious work. So and that's not even to get full citizenship. That's just to get permanent legal residency through this like program in this proposed bill. And then the other really interesting thing that I found, I want to pull up the name because I don't want to misspeak. But it would require employers to use an E-Verify database system, and that will search the government records to confirm the identities of any farm worker that's hired. So basically, it will prevent undocumented immigrants from seeking work. And granted, there's a lot of ways companies like already get around this system in states where it's implemented. However, if you have like a company where a lot of the immigrants are going through this program to try and get permanent legal residency, the E-Verify system has been linked to workplace raids, detention, and deportation of undocumented immigrants and farm workers. So potentially there'd be a lot of like fear that pursuing this system would jeopardize the well-being and the safety of these people and their families. Because the last thing they want, obviously, is to get deported. In general, this article is just kind of depressing because it was like, here are these really two great bills that'll never get passed. And the other two, just to give you the names, are the Citizenship for Essential Workers bill and the Citizenship Act. But like I said, they just don't have the bipartisan support they need to get passed.
That does make me sad. It reminds me a little bit of what Jenna Wadsworth was talking about this morning. I feel like that's a perfect example of how she's really so insightful, and she's taken a lot of like thought and data into her policy recommendations, bills she wants to get passed. But kind of going back to other things that we've said, it is a fight against the government, it feels like sometimes, you know, and the established systems, which I think may be sometimes more out of convenience than even anything else. Like, of course, I'm sure there are people who really do want the system to stay the way it is, but I think a lot of people are just like, it would be too much work to like try to change it, even if they're open to like your ideology, which is why it's important for all of us to work together.
Yes, definitely. All right, well, thank you all for coming. I hope you have a great week, and definitely check out our website to see some of the other events we have coming up. Jenna's session, who we've mentioned several times, is tomorrow. So if you're interested in her policy work, I would highly recommend attending that. I believe it's at 4 p.m. tomorrow. It was nice meeting you all.
Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you. It was a